Laura Walker's life had become quiet, too quiet. Her days were filled with routines that no longer brought comfort. The soft hum of the dishwasher, the creak of the porch swing, the sound of the rain against the windows, all reminders that the once busy home she'd built was now mostly empty. Her daughter Emily was in college, growing into her own world, and Laura was proud. But the silence left her lonely when Emily called to say she was visiting for spring break and that she'd be bringing her boyfriend. Laura felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She wanted everything to be perfect, even though she told herself it was just a short visit. She cleaned the house twice, baked Emily's favorite lemon pie, and worried over the smallest things. She wanted her daughter to feel at home, and she wanted Ryan to see her as more than just Emily's mom. The day they arrived, Laura opened the door to see Emily rushing into her arms. Behind her stood Ryan Tall.com with warm brown eyes and an easy smile. "Mrs. Walker," he said, offering his hand, "thank you for letting me stay." Laura noticed immediately how polite he was. He carried the bags without being asked, complimented her cooking, and laughed easily. That evening, over dinner, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time, Emily happy, glowing. It warmed her heart. After dinner, Emily ran upstairs to unpack, and Ryan stayed behind to help with dishes. Laura tried to wave him off, saying, "You're a guest, Ryan. Sit, relax." But he smiled, rolling up his sleeves. "You've done enough. Let me help." Which a small moment, but it stuck with her. The way he said it, calm and respectful, reminded her of something she missed: a gentle presence in her home. Over the next few days, Ryan became a quiet rhythm in the house. He'd get up early, make coffee for everyone, and sometimes leave small notes on the fridge. "Thanks for breakfast." Or, "Have a great day, Mrs. Walker." He fixed the flickering light in the hallway, repaired a loose door hinge, and even brought her favorite flowers after noticing them in an old vase on the table. Laura wasn't used to such thoughtfulness. For years, she had managed everything alone. Her husband had left when Emily was 12, and since then, life had been about holding things together: bills, repairs, her daughter's dreams. Ryan's quiet kindness filled the home with something that felt like peace. One night, when Emily went to visit a friend, Laura found Ryan sitting on the back porch, a cup of tea beside him, watching the rain. She hesitated, then joined him. "Beautiful evening," she said. He smiled. "It is. Reminds me of home. I grew up in Oregon. Rain feels like comfort." They talked easily about family, childhood, and small things that somehow felt big when shared. Laura told him about raising Emily alone, about the struggles of letting her daughter go off to college. Ryan listened without interrupting. He wasn't pretending. He was present, sincere. "You've done something incredible," he said softly. "Emily's one of the kindest people I've met. That's because of you." His words caught her off guard. She looked away, her chest tight. Compliments had become rare in her life. "Thank you," she said finally. "You're very kind." That night, after Ryan went inside, Laura stayed on the porch for a while, staring at the wet streetlights. She felt something she couldn't quite name, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Not romantic, but deeply human. It was the feeling of being seen. The next day, Emily announced that her best friend, Kate, had invited her on a weekend trip to Seattle. "You don't mind if I go, do you, Mom?" "Ryan said he'll stay here to finish some work for his class." Laura hesitated. Having Ryan in the house without Emily there felt strange. But she trusted him. "Of course," she said. "That's fine." When Emily left, the house felt emptier than ever. Ryan worked quietly in the living room, his laptop open, papers spread out. Occasionally, he'd ask Laura about her garden or tell her about a book he was reading that evening. As the sun set behind the trees, Laura cooked dinner. Ryan insisted on helping again, chopping vegetables while she stirred the soup. They talked about dreams, his plans to study architecture, her wish to one day travel to Italy. "You should go," he said with a smile. "You talk about it like it's a place you already love." "Maybe one day," she replied, "when I stop finding reasons not to." After dinner, they sat in the living room with cups of tea. A light rain began to fall again, tapping softly against the windows. Ryan looked thoughtful, his gaze lingering on the quiet space around them. "You've built something special here," he said. "It feels like home." Laura smiled faintly. "It is home, even if it's quieter than it used to be." They sat in silence for a few moments, and she realized she wasn't uncomfortable. There was something natural about his presence, no tension, just warmth. But something was changing, and she could feel it. The small things, the way he listened, the care in his tone. The moments they shared without words started to mean more than they should. Not in a way that broke rules, but in a way that stirred something deep inside her. The memory of connection, of closeness, of being understood. The next morning, Ryan came downstairs earlier than usual. He seemed restless, as if something was on his mind. Laura was making coffee when he spoke quietly. "Mrs. Walker," he said, his voice serious, "can we talk?" "Of course," she said, turning toward him. He took a deep breath. "It's about Emily, and about you." Laura froze. There was something in his tone she hadn't heard before, nervousness, maybe even guilt. "What about us?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. He hesitated, looking down for a moment before meeting her eyes. "I've realized something this week. Something I can't ignore." The air in the kitchen grew still. Laura's heart began to race, though she didn't know why. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Ryan looked at her, eyes honest, voice quiet but clear. "I think I need to tell you the truth before things go any further." Laura stood there, unsure of what he was about to say, but certain that whatever it would change everything. The coffee pot clicked off, the rain outside stopped, and the silence between them grew heavier with every passing second. Ryan took another step forward. Still unsure, still hesitant, but ready. "Mrs. Walker," he said finally, "I think you deserve to know what I really feel." And with those words, the balance of her quiet life began to shift. Laura froze in place, her hands gripping the counter as Ryan's words hung in the air. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound between them. His face wasn't bold or confident, it was uncertain, even nervous. As though he was afraid of how she might react. She took a breath and steadied her voice. "Ryan, what do you mean?" He hesitated, his gaze falling to the floor. "I mean, I haven't been honest about how I feel. Not with Emily, not with myself." Laura's heart began to pound. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, throwing soft gold over everything. She didn't know if she wanted to hear what was coming next, but she couldn't look away. Ryan continued, speaking carefully. "When I came here, I thought I was just visiting my girlfriend's family. But this week it's been different. You've shown me what a real home feels like. What kindness feels like. You listen. You care. I felt more peace here in a few days than I have in years." Laura blinked, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to stop him, but something inside her, something curious, something long ignored, kept her still. "Ryan," she said gently, "you're young and you're just confused." "You and Emily," he shook his head. "No, it's not about that. Emily's amazing, she is. But we're different. We've been growing apart for months. I didn't even realize how distant things were until I came here." Laura felt a rush of emotion, guilt, confusion, disbelief. This was her daughter's boyfriend. She shouldn't even be listening. Yet Ryan's honesty held a strange gravity. "I shouldn't have said anything," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I just thought you should know before she gets back. I didn't want to keep pretending." Laura leaned against the counter, her voice soft. "You did the right thing by being honest. But Ryan, you can't stay here now. It wouldn't be fair to Emily." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I understand. I'll leave tonight." The rest of the day passed in silence. Laura moved through the house like a ghost, folding laundry, cleaning dishes that didn't need cleaning, trying to make sense of what had happened. She wasn't angry, just unsettled. Ryan's words had stirred something deep within her, recognition of how lonely she truly was. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the trees, Ryan came downstairs with his bag. He looked tired but calm. "I'll grab a bus to Portland," he said quietly. Thanks for everything, Mrs. Walker. Laura felt her heart twist. Ryan, wait. She walked him to the door, her hands trembling slightly. Please be careful. And don't be too hard on yourself. You're young, you're allowed to figure things out. He gave a small, grateful smile. You're kind, Laura. You always have been. When he said her name, it sounded softer, almost reverent. For a moment, she didn't know what to do, so she simply nodded and closed the door behind him. The house felt emptier than ever that night. The echoes of his voice lingered in her head, and she found herself staring out the window long after midnight, wondering when her life had become a series of goodbyes. A few days later, Emily called. Her voice was cheerful at first, but it quickly faded when Laura told her that Ryan had gone home early. He didn't even text me, Emily said, confused. Did something happen? Laura hesitated. She couldn't bring herself to tell her daughter the truth. It would hurt too much. No, she said softly. He just said he had some things to take care of. Maybe he needed space. Emily was quiet for a long time. Yeah, she said finally. Maybe. When the call ended, Laura sat alone on the couch, staring at the framed photos on the wall, pictures of birthdays, holidays, family vacations. She realized how much time had passed since she'd truly felt part of something meaningful. A week went by. The days were long, and the silence even longer. Laura tried to distract herself gardening, reading, volunteering at the library, but the memory of Ryan's expression wouldn't leave her mind. He had looked at her not like a boy in love, but like someone who had seen something familiar in her loneliness. Then, one evening, as she returned from the store, she saw a familiar car parked outside her house. Ryan stepped out, his jacket slightly wet from the rain, holding a small box. "Ryan?" she asked, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He looked embarrassed. "I know I shouldn't have come without calling, but I needed to see you." Laura frowned, her voice careful. "You shouldn't be here." Emily's still trying to make sense of what happened. "I know," he said quickly, "and I'm not here to make things harder. I just came to bring this." He held out the box. Inside was a delicate bracelet, silver, with a tiny engraved charm. "It's for Emily," he said. "Something she left in my car. I wanted to return it in person." Laura took it quietly, her throat tight. "You could have mailed it." "I could have," he admitted. "But I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." The sincerity in his eyes made it impossible to stay angry. She stepped aside, motioning him in. "You can dry off. I'll make coffee." They sat at the kitchen table again like before. Only now the air felt heavier, filled with unspoken memories. "I've been thinking a lot," Ryan said quietly. "About what I said. About how I made you uncomfortable. I shouldn't have crossed that line." Laura shook her head. "You were honest. That's not something people should regret," smiled faintly. "Still, I wanted you to know that I'm trying to fix things. I talked to Emily. We agreed to take a break. She deserves clarity." Laura nodded. "That's good. It's the right thing." They fell into easy conversation after that about books, work, and plans for the future. It wasn't like before. There was a new kind of calm between them. But when Ryan stood to leave, he paused at the door. "I don't know what happens next," he said, "but I just want you to know you made a difference in my life. You reminded me what kindness looks like, what honesty feels like." Laura felt her eyes sting. "Thank you, Ryan. You should focus on your future. You have so much ahead of you." He nodded slowly, his expression warm but sad. "You too, Laura. You deserve more than quiet days and empty rooms." And with that, he was gone again. That night, Laura sat on the porch, listening to the rain. His words echoed in her heart. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Someone had noticed her not as a mother, not as a neighbor, but as a person. It wasn't love. It wasn't wrong. It was human connection, pure and fragile. Weeks turned into months. Emily eventually called to tell her she was doing fine, that she'd met new friends, started a photography project, and even thanked Laura for being there when everything got confusing. Laura smiled at that. "Always, honey," she said. always. That evening, she opened her window, letting in the cool summer air. On her nightstand sat a folded piece of paper, a note Ryan had left behind the day he first left. It read, "Thank you for showing me what home feels like." She read it one last time, then tucked it away in a drawer. Not because she wanted to forget, but because she finally understood. Some people come into our lives not to stay forever, but to remind us of who we still are. Laura turned off the light, the corners of her mouth lifting into a quiet smile. The silence that once felt heavy now felt peaceful, almost alive. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Months passed, and the world outside Laura's window changed from bright summer to the crisp hues of fall. The maple trees around her small Oregon home turned gold and red, scattering leaves across the driveway like tiny fragments of memory. Life had settled into quiet rhythm again: morning coffee, her job at the community library, phone calls with Emily, and long walks by the river where the air smelled of rain and pine. But sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she thought of Ryan, the young man who had come into her life unexpectedly, stirred her emotions, and then disappeared just as quickly. She didn't dwell on it with guilt anymore. It wasn't that kind of story. It was something gentler, sadder, but also healing. It had reminded her that her heart was still capable of feeling alive. One chilly morning, Laura received a text from an unknown number. "Hi, it's Ryan. Hope you're doing okay. I'm back in town for a while." Her fingers hovered over the screen. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to leave that chapter closed, but curiosity won. "I'm fine, thank you. I hope you're doing well too." A few minutes later, his reply came. "Would you mind if I stopped by? Just to say hello." She hesitated. It had been months. Emily had moved on, and nothing inappropriate had ever happened between them. Still, her heart beat faster. After a moment, she typed, "Sure, stop by this afternoon." When the doorbell rang hours later, Laura was almost afraid to open it. But when she did, she saw a different version of Ryan, older somehow, calmer, dressed neatly in a gray jacket and jeans. He smiled politely. "Hi, Mrs. Walker." She smiled back. "It's been a while, Ryan. Come in." The house felt smaller with him in it, memories brushing against her mind like faint echoes. They sat in the kitchen again, the same place where everything had started. But this time, the air was lighter, more comfortable. "I just wanted to thank you," Ryan said, his voice steady. "After I left, I went back home, took time to figure out who I wanted to be. You helped me realize I needed to stop running from things." Laura looked at him curiously. "I didn't do much, Ryan. You made those changes yourself." He shook his head. "No, you did more than you think. You listened. That meant something to me." They talked for hours about work, life, and how Emily had gone to New York for graduate school. Laura was proud of her daughter, though she missed her terribly. "She seems happy," Ryan said. "We talked a few weeks ago. I apologized again, and she said she's grateful we both learned something." Laura felt a warm sense of closure. "That sounds like her," she said with a smile. "She's always been mature about these things." As the conversation went on, Ryan mentioned that he had started working with a nonprofit organization helping at-risk teens. His face lit up when he spoke about it. "It's rewarding," he said. "And I think about what you said that day, that being kind isn't weakness. It's strength." Laura felt proud. It was rare to see someone grow so much in such a short time. When he left that evening, she stood at the door, watching him walk down the driveway. The sun was setting, the light soft and gold. He turned once and waved. "Take care, Laura," he said, using her first name naturally now, as though time had quietly changed the rules between them. "You too," she replied, smiling. Weeks turned into winter. Snow dusted the rooftops, and Christmas lights blinked on every porch. Laura's days were filled with small joys: baking, reading, helping neighbors decorate. But even in the warmth of her quiet routines, she sometimes thought about that visit. There was a peace in knowing that things had ended, not with bitterness, but with understanding. Yet deep down, she sensed something unresolved, not romantic, but meaningful. like a book with one last chapter missing. That chapter arrived one morning in February. Laura received a letter, handwritten and folded neatly inside a small envelope. The handwriting was familiar Rion's. She sat at her kitchen table and began to read. Dear Laura, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to write this instead of text because some things are better said slowly. I've been accepted into a long-term volunteer program overseas. It's something I've dreamed of doing for years. Before I go, I wanted to thank you one more time for being someone who saw me clearly when I didn't see myself at all. You once told me that kindness can change a person's direction. You did that for me. If you ever wonder whether your quiet strength makes a difference, take care of yourself. I'll carry your advice wherever I go. Laura set the letter down, her eyes misty but calm. She read it twice, then 3 times, as if memorizing each word. It wasn't a confession or a goodbye filled with regret. It was gratitude, a simple acknowledgement that their paths had crossed for a reason. She folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her journal. That evening, she lit a candle and sat by the window, watching snowflakes drift under the streetlights. There was a peace in her heart she hadn't felt in years. Months later, Emily returned home for the summer, her laughter filling the quiet house again. One night, as they sat on the porch sipping tea, Emily said, "You know, I ran into Ryan's mom last week. He's in South America now, working with kids. She said he's doing amazing things." Laura smiled, looking up at the stars. "That sounds like him." Emily glanced at her mother curiously. "You two got along well, didn't you?" Laura nodded slowly. "Yes, we understood each other." Emily grinned. "He said once that you were the calmest person he'd ever met." Laura laughed softly. "I don't know about calm, but I tried." There was a long pause, comfortable and warm. Emily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I'm glad you had someone to talk to when I was gone," she whispered. "You deserve that." Laura felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, sweetheart. I think we both learned from that time." When Emily went inside, Laura stayed a little longer, letting the cool night air brush against her skin. She thought about how life had a way of surprising her, bringing people into her world when she least expected it, teaching her lessons in the quiet spaces between heartbreak and healing. A few weeks later, while cleaning out a drawer, she found the bracelet Ryan had returned months ago. She held it in her palm for a long moment, tracing the tiny charm with her thumb. Then she placed it in a box along with his letter and a few old photos of Emily. It wasn't about holding on, it was about remembering that even brief connections could leave lasting warmth. As spring came again, Laura began volunteering at the community youth center. The first day she walked in, she saw the faces of young people full of uncertainty and potential. The same kind of restlessness she'd once seen in Ryan. She smiled and introduced herself. "I'm Laura," she said. "I'm here to help with whatever you need." In those moments, she felt something shift inside her. The loneliness that once weighed her down had turned into purpose. Every word of encouragement she offered, every story she listened to, it all reminded her of that season in her life when a young man had taught her that kindness isn't just an act, it's a legacy. One evening, as she was leaving the center, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Hi, Laura. It's Ryan. Just wanted to say I saw your name in the volunteer newsletter. You're still inspiring people, huh?" She smiled as she typed back. "Just following your example." His reply came almost instantly. "Guess we both learn from each other." Laura looked out at the setting sun, its golden light spilling over the city. She realized then that life didn't always give you the endings you expected, but it often gave you the ones you needed. She tucked her phone away, took a deep breath, and walked home under the soft evening sky. The air full of promise. Somewhere across the world, a young man she once knew was probably watching a similar sunset. Both of them carrying pieces of each other's kindness forward in quiet, invisible ways. And that was enough.